He was just a single dad trying to get home in the rain. She was just an older woman struggling with her grocery bags. But in the background, a bodyguard watched every move. This wasn't a chance meeting, it was a test. And 3 days later, a lawyer would arrive at the dad's door with an offer that came with a hidden price. The dad, Alex Reed, was 34, working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on for his 6-year-old daughter. The woman, Elena Vance, wasn't just wealthy. She was one of the world's most reclusive billionaires, a person who hadn't been photographed in over a decade. Her security didn't just protect her, they assessed everyone she met. And in that moment, Alex passed a test he never knew he was taking. To understand why a simple grocery run became a life-altering test, you have to understand the 2 worlds that collided that afternoon. One side was Alex Reed. His life was a meticulously balanced equation of time and debt. He worked the morning shift as a maintenance technician at the local community college, fixing leaky faucets and humming fluorescent lights, and 3 evenings a week he stocked shelves at a grocery warehouse. His daughter, Mia, was 6. Her mother had left when Mia was 2, a postcard from Reno arriving 6 months later that simply read, "I can't do this, I'm sorry." The child's support never came. Alex's world was defined by a constant, low-grade arithmetic. Could he cover the rent, the daycare, the unexpected $60 fee for a school field trip? The answer was usually yes, but only by a margin so thin it felt like holding your breath. The rain that Tuesday in October wasn't in the forecast. It arrived suddenly, a cold, diagonal downpour that turned the suburban sidewalks into shallow rivers. Alex had just picked up Mia from after-school care. He was tired, the kind of tired that makes your bones feel heavy. He needed milk, bread, eggs, the staples that disappeared at twice the speed when a growing child was involved. The supermarket was on the way home, a sprawling, brightly lit chain store. He parked his 11-year-old sedan, its passenger window sealed with duct tape and a trash bag from the inside. "We'll be quick, Bug," he told Mia, lifting her onto his shoulders beneath his only umbrella, a golf one he'd found left behind on a bus years ago. Inside, they moved with practiced efficiency. Mia, perched in the cart, pointed at cereal boxes with cartoon mascots. Alex said no, gently, every time, reaching instead for the store-brand bagged version. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder for the car insurance payment due in 3 days. He swiped it away. This was the man, focused on the price of a gallon of milk, who rounded the end of the canned vegetable aisle and saw her, an older woman, elegant despite being soaked. Her silver-gray hair was plastered to her forehead. She wore a simple but beautiful dark green wool coat, now darkened with water. She was struggling. A paper grocery bag, overstuffed and soggy at the bottom, had ripped as she tried to lift it into her cart. A can of soup hit the floor and rolled. A box of crackers followed. She stood there, one hand on her cart, the other holding the disintegrating bag, looking suddenly and profoundly overwhelmed. Alex didn't hesitate. He parked his cart. "Mia, stay right here for a second, okay?" He walked over. "Here, let me get that for you." He crouched, gathering the scattered items. He took the ruined bag from her hands, its bottom giving way entirely. "These paper ones are the worst in the rain," he said, with a sympathetic shake of his head. "Do you have another bag?" She didn't. So Alex took 2 of his own reusable bags from his cart, the sturdy canvas ones he'd bought at a fundraiser years ago, and carefully transferred her groceries. He hefted the bags. "Where are you parked? I'll carry them out for you." Her relief was visible. "You are very kind," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Just out front. I thought I could manage." She gestured weakly at the rain sheeting down the store windows. "Nobody can manage in that," Alex smiled. "Come on." He carried the bags. Mia, fascinated by the kind lady, walked beside them holding her father's free hand. They made it to the automatic doors. The woman's car was idling at the curb, a sleek, silent black sedan. As Alex approached, the passenger door opened, not by the woman, but by a large man in a dark suit who emerged from the driver's seat. Alex handed him the bags. "All set," he said. The woman turned to Alex. She took his hand in both of hers. Her hands were cold. "Thank you," she said, and there was an intensity in her gaze, a searching quality that lasted a beat longer than felt normal. "You have a good heart." Then she was in the car, and the door closed. The sedan pulled smoothly away into the gray curtain of rain. Alex stood for a second, the oddness of the moment, the suited driver, the woman's intense gratitude, registering, then being dismissed by the more pressing reality of his own groceries getting wet and a hungry daughter. Okay, Bug, our turn to run for it. He never saw the second car, a dark blue SUV nondescript parked 4 slots down from where the black sedan had been. Inside, a man named David Chen watched the entire interaction on a tablet, a live feed from a high-resolution camera concealed in the SUV's grille. He watched Alex help. He watched Alex's daughter. He watched the transfer of the bags. He watched the woman, Elena Vance, take Alex's hand. David Chen spoke softly into his wrist. Interaction complete. Subject read Alex. Assistance rendered. No apparent expectation of reward. Proceeding to Phase 2, background verification. The SUV did not follow the black sedan. It lingered, and then, when Alex's old car left the lot, it followed him. This was the other world. Elena Vance, age 67, net worth estimated at $2.4 billion, almost all of it inherited and grown through discrete, long-term investments in pharmaceuticals and medical technology. She was the majority shareholder of Vance Therapeutics, though she had not set foot in its corporate headquarters in over 15 years. Her husband, Arthur Vance, a pioneering cardiac surgeon, had died suddenly of an aneurysm nearly 2 decades prior. They had no children. After his death, Elena retreated from public life entirely. She gave no interviews. She attended no galas. She lived in a sprawling, fortified estate on 50 wooded acres outside the city, her public face managed by a famously tight-lipped law firm. But Elena Vance was not a recluse because she disliked people. She was a recluse because she had become profoundly disillusioned by them. After Arthur's death, she had been besieged. Distant relatives emerged with investment schemes. Charities employed guilt as a fundraising tool. A landscaper attempted to blackmail her over a fabricated story. She learned, painfully, that her wealth acted as a gravitational force, distorting every relationship, attracting every kind of opportunist. Her security team, led by David Chen, a former intelligence analyst, wasn't just for physical protection. It was a filter. Their primary directive was to identify and neutralize threats, but Elena had given a secondary, private directive to David years ago: find me someone real. It was an impossible ask. How do you test for authenticity in a world where anyone, knowing the reward, could perform kindness? The answer Elena and David devised was a system of invisible, uncontrolled tests. Elena would, on rare occasions, venture out with a minimal visible detail, just herself and her driver, appearing as a well-off but not extraordinary elderly woman. David's team would follow at a distance, observing, recording. The scenarios were never staged. They relied on the chaos of everyday life: a dropped purse, a struggle with a heavy door, a flat tire in a parking lot. The potential candidates were strangers, selected in the moment by chance. The criteria were simple and brutal. Was the help offered freely? Was it done without condescension, with genuine empathy? And most importantly, what happened after? Did the helper look around, as if expecting a reward or recognition? Did they mention their own troubles, subtly or not? Hundreds of interactions had been observed over the years. Almost all failed. The man who helped with the flat tire then asked if she knew anyone who was hiring. The woman who picked up a dropped glove and spent 10 minutes detailing her struggles with mortgage payments. Each failure confirmed Elena's worldview, deepening her isolation. Then came Alex Reed. David Chen's background report, compiled over the next 48 hours, painted a picture of a man at the edge of his resources. No criminal record, a stable if low-wage employment history, over $6,000 in credit card debt, medical bills from an emergency room visit for Mia the previous winter. He was, by every metric, the kind of person who could use a financial miracle. And yet, in the supermarket, he had asked for nothing. He had not even given his name. "He's clean," David reported to Elena in her library later that second night. "And his need is significant, but the motive in the moment appears to have been uncalculated." Elena stared into the fire. "The child," she said. "How was he with the child?" "Attentive, patient. She was his priority throughout." Elena was silent for a long time. "Prepare the package," she said finally, "and the letter, use Franklin." Franklin was the family lawyer, the only outsider who ever delivered messages of consequence. David nodded. "The standard non-disclosure terms." No, Elena said, turning from the fire. Not this time. This isn't a transaction. It's an invitation. Draft it accordingly. And so, 3 days after the rain-soaked grocery run, a black town car pulled up in front of Alex Reed's modest duplex. A man in an impeccably tailored suit emerged, carrying a simple leather briefcase. He walked up the cracked concrete path and rang the doorbell. Inside, Alex was trying to fix a leak under the kitchen sink, his hands wet, his mind on the insurance payment he just postponed. When he opened the door, he saw a stranger who looked like he'd stepped out of a different universe. The man smiled politely. "Mr. Alex Reed." "Yes." "My name is Franklin Moss. I represent Elena Vance. I believe you recently assisted her. May I come in? We have a matter of great importance to discuss." Inside, over a chipped formica table, Franklin Moss laid out the terms. It wasn't a check. It was a proposal. Elena Vance wished to extend an invitation. She was offering Alex a position, not as an employee but as a companion. A part-time role, 20 hours a week, at a salary of $120,000 a year. The duties were vague: conversation, occasional errands, being a present and genuine person in her life. There would be a non-disclosure agreement, of course. And a background check, which Franklin noted with a slight smile, had already been completed. The offer included a signing bonus of $25,000, available immediately to clear any pressing debts. Alex stared at the lawyer, then at the formal letter on his table. Mia was in the next room, the sound of cartoons drifting through the doorway. "This is a joke," he said flatly. "Is this from some TV show?" "It is not a joke, Mr. Reed," Franklin said, his voice even. "Miss Vance is a very private woman who values authenticity above all else. Your actions 3 days ago demonstrated a quality she finds increasingly rare. She is not offering charity. She is offering employment for a specific skill set, the skill of being a decent human being without an agenda." The number 120,000 echoed in Alex's head. It was more than double what he made working 2 jobs for half the hours. It was daycare secured. It was the duct-taped window on his car replaced. It was breathing room, but it felt like a trap. Why me? There are a million people who would do this. Perhaps, Franklin conceded, but they would be doing it for the money. You did it without knowing there was money. That is the distinction. The offer is open for 72 hours. He slid a business card across the table. "My direct line, no intermediaries." After the lawyer left, Alex sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time. He called his younger brother Jamie, the only person he trusted. Jamie's reaction was immediate. "It's a scam, has to be. No one pays that kind of money for a friend." But the $25,000 bonus was real. The direct deposit hit Alex's checking account the next morning. He saw the notification on his phone while standing in line for coffee, a transaction from Vance Holdings LLC. He nearly dropped the phone. It was the exact amount of his credit card debt, to the dollar. David Chen's background check had been thorough. This was the first pivot. The money was not theoretical, it was in his account. The power dynamic shifted instantly. It was no longer an abstract offer from a distant billionaire. It was a life raft that had already been thrown, and he was already holding onto it. He called Franklin Moss. The arrangement began discreetly. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, Alex would drive to the Vance estate. A black SUV would meet him at a designated parking lot 5 miles away, sweep his car, and then he would be driven the rest of the way in a vehicle with blacked-out windows. The estate was not a mansion in the traditional sense. It was a sprawling, low-slung modern compound built into a hillside, all glass and weathered steel, surrounded by silent woods. It felt less like a home and more like a very beautiful bunker. Elena Vance was different in her own environment. The vulnerable woman in the rain was gone, replaced by a sharp, observant presence. Their first meetings were awkward, structured around tea in a sun-drenched room overlooking a koi pond. She asked him about his life, about Mia, about his work. She listened with an intensity that was unnerving. She wasn't making polite conversation, she was studying him. Alex, for his part, was determined to be himself. He talked about the frustrations of his maintenance job, the funny things Mia said, his fear of never getting ahead. He did not try to impress her. He was simply honest. And something shifted. After a few weeks, the interviews became conversations. Elena began to share fragments of her own life, the isolation of wealth, the loneliness of being constantly assessed, the grief for her husband that had never dulled, only hardened into a permanent part of her architecture. She told him about the landscape who tried to blackmail her, about the friends who had sold stories to tabloids. "You learn," she said one afternoon, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup, "that every open hand eventually turns over, palm up, expecting payment." Meanwhile, David Chen's surveillance did not end. It intensified, but now it was focused outward. Alex and Mia were placed under protective detail. At first, Alex was unaware. Then he started noticing things. A similar car in his rearview mirror on multiple drives. A man reading a newspaper outside Mia's school during pickup. When he asked Franklin about it, the lawyer confirmed it. "Miss Vance considers you and your daughter to be under her protection. Your association with her creates certain vulnerabilities. Mr. Chen's team mitigates those risks." It was equal parts comforting and terrifying. His life was no longer entirely his own. He was a node in a vast, invisible security apparatus. He signed the formal employment contract in Franklin's office in the city. The terms were staggering. The salary, full family medical and dental insurance, a college trust established for Mia, and a clause stating that upon satisfactory fulfillment of the 5-year term, Alex would receive a completion bonus of $2 million. The NDA was 30 pages long, stipulating that he could never publicly acknowledge his relationship with Elena Vance, nor profit from telling his story. The penalty for breach was the forfeiture of all compensation and severe legal repercussions. Alex signed. He had crossed the Rubicon. The money changed everything and nothing. He quit his warehouse job but kept the maintenance position at the college, reducing his hours. He paid off every debt. He bought a reliable used car. He enrolled Mia in a better after-school program. The constant grinding fear in his chest began to ease, but a new anxiety took its place, the fear of losing it all, of saying the wrong thing, of failing some unspoken test. Then 6 months in, the second pivot occurred. Elena asked him during one of their Thursday conversations if he had any skill with tools with his hands. He laughed, talking about his job fixing things. A week later, she presented him with a project. A guest cottage on the far edge of the property, a charming but dilapidated A-frame had fallen into disrepair. "I'd like it restored," she said. "Not by a contractor, by you. Consider it part of your duties, a hands-on diversion." It was a test, but of a different kind. It was a test of competence, of patience, of vision. Alex threw himself into it with the same diligence he applied to everything. He spent weekends there, measuring, sanding, repairing. He brought Mia sometimes, and she would play in the overgrown garden while he worked. Elena would visit, never offering advice, just watching him work, asking questions about joinery and paint types. The project became a neutral space where their unusual relationship could breathe, away from the formality of the main house. It was during this time that Alex met Victor Alden. Victor was Elena's nephew, her late sister's son. He was in his early 40s, impeccably dressed, with the polished sheen of someone who had never worked with his hands. He arrived unannounced one afternoon while Alex was on a ladder, replacing a rotted fascia board. Victor's sports car crackled up the gravel drive and stopped dramatically. "And who are you?" Victor asked, not bothering with hello. "Alex, I'm working on the cottage." Victor looked him up and down, taking in Alex's work jeans and tool belt. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. "Ah," he said, "you're the new project, the charity case. Aunt Ellie told me she'd taken on a pet." The air went out of the afternoon. Alex came down the ladder. "I work for Miss Vance." "I know exactly what you do," Victor said, his voice dropping. "You keep her company, you listen to her stories, you're a paid friend. Let me give you some free advice. My aunt is eccentric. She gets these ideas. She also loses interest. Enjoy it while it lasts." He patted the hood of his car. "And a word to the wise, the family watches. We protect our own and our interests." Victor left as abruptly as he arrived. That evening, Alex mentioned the encounter to Elena. Her face, usually so composed, hardened into something glacial. "Victor," she said, the word like a shard of ice, "is my heir. On paper, he assumes that because he is the only blood relative, everything will default to him. He is a vulture waiting. His visits are audits." She looked at Alex, and for the first time, he saw a flash of real fear in her eyes. his interest in you is not casual. Be careful. The confrontation opened a door Alex hadn't known was there. The world inside the Vance estate was not a sanctuary. It was a fortress under a subtle, simmering siege. He asked David Chen about Victor later that week. Mr. Alden, David said, choosing his words with care, is a subject of ongoing assessment. He has significant gambling debts. He has made several attempts to borrow against his expected inheritance through third-party lenders. He is motivated. A month later, the third pivot hit, and it came from the outside world. A reporter from a financial tabloid, the kind that specialized in billionaire gossip, called the main house line. He was asking about the mysterious handyman who's become a constant companion to the reclusive Elena Vance. He had photos, grainy but identifiable, of Alex entering the black SUV at the rendezvous point. He knew Alex's name. He knew he had a daughter. The story was set to run in 3 days. Panic erupted in the compound. Elena was furious, not at Alex, but at the breach. David Chen's investigation was swift. The leak was traced not to Alex's circle, but to Victor's. Victor, it seemed, had tipped off the reporter, hoping the ensuing scandal would pressure Elena to cut ties with her risky new companion, destabilizing Alex's position. Elena's response was swift and brutal. She instructed Franklin Moss to draft a codicil to her will that very night. The new clause created a discretionary trust, controlled by an independent executor, with an initial funding of $30 million. The trust's beneficiary was Alex Reed. It was not a direct inheritance. It was a shielded, irrevocable fund that would provide for him and Mia, regardless of what happened to her or the main estate. It was a firewall against Victor. When Franklin explained the codicil to Alex, the weight of it was incomprehensible. $30 million. It was a number that belonged in movies, not in his life. She's doing this, Franklin said, because she believes your presence is of value, and because she wants to ensure that value is protected from other interests. But the codicil had a trigger. It would only be filed with the court and activated upon one condition: Elena's death. As long as she lived, it was a private document, a sword of Damocles hanging over Victor's head. Alex now held, unknowingly, a piece of paper that made him a direct threat to a desperate man with everything to lose. The reporter's story ran. It was a sensational, thinly sourced piece titled "The Billionaire and the Handyman." It painted Alex as a potential gold digger, a mysterious figure who had wormed his way into the inner circle. The article quoted a family source, Victor expressing concern for Miss Vance's judgment and financial security. The morning the article published, Alex found a note tucked under his windshield wiper at his apartment. It was not from the press. It was a single line, printed on plain paper: "Know your place, or you'll be removed from it." He showed it to David Chen. David's face was grim. "The threat assessment has just been elevated," he said. "This is no longer about reputation. This is a direct warning. From this point forward, Mr. Reed, you and your daughter are to follow strict security protocols. You are now a person of interest in a very high-stakes game." That night, as Alex lay awake, listening to Mia's steady breathing in the next room, the full reality crashed down. The money, the security, the beautiful prison of the estate, it was all part of an ecosystem with predators. He had thought he was being paid for his kindness. He was wrong. He was being paid to be a pawn in a silent war. And the king, Elena Vance, had just moved him directly into the line of fire. The protocols changed everything. Mia's school was given a confidential list of authorized pickup persons: Alex, his brother Jamie, and 2 names he didn't recognize, David Chen's operatives. Alex's route to the estate was randomized daily, communicated via an encrypted messaging app an hour before each visit. His apartment was fitted with discrete sensors on doors and windows, feeding data back to a security hub David called the watch floor. The warmth of the initial arrangement had vanished, replaced by the sterile hum of a protection detail. Alex was living in a gilded cage with invisible bars. He tried to explain it to Jamie, who stared at him across a diner booth like he was speaking a foreign language. "So you have a bodyguard because you helped an old lady with groceries? Alex, this isn't normal. This is paranoid. She's bought you." "She's protecting an investment," Alex replied, the phrase tasting bitter. It was the term Franklin Moss had used. No, Jamie said, shaking his head. She's created a hostage. You and Mia, you think you can ever just walk away from this? From that money, you're trapped. The words echoed Alex's own midnight fears. He was trapped, but the alternative, going back to the life of duct-taped windows and constant arithmetic of lack, felt like a different kind of prison. He was caught between two terrible freedoms. At the estate, Elena was different. The article had wounded her, but it had also galvanized her. She stopped speaking about Victor with veiled disdain. She began asking Alex specific, pointed questions about security, about his comfort levels, about Mia. She was no longer just his employer or his companion. She was a general preparing for a siege, and she was assessing the fortifications around her newest asset. Then Victor made his next move. It wasn't another note. It was a legal subpoena. A process server arrived at Alex's apartment on a Tuesday morning. The documents were from a civil suit, Victor Alden versus Elena Vance. The suit challenged Elena's mental competency and accused her of undue influence by a third party, specifically Alex Reed. Victor's filing claimed Alex was a manipulative outsider who had exploited a vulnerable, elderly woman to gain control of her finances. It pointed to the employment contract, the trust codicil, the sudden inflow of money into Alex's life as proof of a predatory relationship. Victor was petitioning the court to have Elena declared mentally unfit and to appoint himself as her legal guardian, which would instantly void any recent changes to her will or financial dispositions. It was a nuclear option, and it was terrifyingly clever. It reframed Alex's kindness as a long con. It weaponized the very secrecy Elena prized, painting their private arrangement as something sinister. Franklin Moss was livid. "This is a predatory filing, but it's not without risk," he told Alex in an emergency meeting at the law firm. "Competency hearings are messy, public, and subjective. A judge might order independent evaluations. Victor is betting that the spectacle alone will force Elena to settle, to revoke the codicil and cut ties with you to make the case go away." Elena's response, delivered through Franklin, was a single line: "We fight." War was now official, and it was being waged in the public records of the county courthouse. Alex was deposed. For 4 hours, Victor's lawyer, a sleek, aggressive woman, hammered at him. She asked about his debts before meeting Elena. She asked him to detail every dollar he'd received. She insinuated he had researched Elena before the grocery encounter. She read the tabloid article into the record. Through it all, Alex clung to the truth. He had carried groceries for a stranger in the rain. That was all. But the legal attack had a second, more insidious effect. It forced Elena's hand into the light. To defend her competency, her legal team had to demonstrate her sound judgment, which meant, paradoxically, they had to publicly justify her relationship with Alex. Franklin arranged for a series of private interviews with a court-appointed psychologist. Elena had to explain, to a stranger, why Alex mattered. She had to articulate the value of decency in a world of transactions. Alex saw the toll it took. After one long session, she looked exhausted in a way he'd never seen. "I am having to justify my own soul to a man with a clipboard," she said, her voice thin. "This is what Victor has done. He has made my last genuine connection feel like a symptom of illness." The pressure was fracturing the careful world they'd built. Then, David Chen discovered something that changed the game entirely. It started with the security detail's routine monitoring of Victor. They tracked his communications, his movements, his finances. He was spending more time at a private clinic across the state line, a place that specialized in addiction treatment and discreet psychiatric care. At first, they assumed it was for his gambling. Then David's analysts cross-referenced the clinic's pharmaceutical procurement logs with Victor's visitation records. They found a disturbing pattern. The clinic was ordering unusually large quantities of a specific, potent benzodiazepine, a sedative used for severe anxiety, but one that, in sustained high doses, could induce confusion, memory loss, and mimic early dementia. Victor wasn't a patient, he was a supplier. David presented the findings to Elena and Alex in her study. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Financial transfers from Victor to a shell company that owned the clinic, encrypted messages discussing treatment protocols and compliance, and the testimony of a former clinic nurse, now in witness protection, who stated she'd been instructed to manage the anxiety of wealthy clients whose families wanted them more pliable. "He's done this before," David said, his voice cold. "We believe he has been testing methodologies, small doses, monitoring effects. The competency suit isn't just a legal strategy, it's a smokescreen. His endgame isn't to have her declared incompetent, it's to make her incompetent." The room went silent. Alex felt the floor tilt. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about poisoning. It was about murder in slow motion. Elena sat perfectly still. "He would need access," she said finally, "to my food, my medicine." "He has it," David replied. "He visits. He brings gifts. Bottled water from obscure springs, specialty teas, supplements. Our scans are for explosives and weapons, not chemical contaminants. We have to assume he's already begun." This was the "it gets worse" moment. The financial threat, the legal battle, they were just the visible tips of an iceberg whose hidden mass was pure, premeditated evil. Victor wasn't just a greedy nephew. He was a would-be murderer, experimenting with the tools to do it. A brutal, silent urgency replaced the previous tension. David's team swept Elena's private quarters. They found nothing, which was almost more frightening. It meant the contamination, if it existed, was intermittent or had been removed. Elena submitted to a full toxicology panel. The results came back clean, but the doctor noted the tests could only detect what was in her system that day, not what had been there and metabolized out weeks ago. The crisis forced a stark alliance. Elena, Alex, David, and Franklin were now a war council. They couldn't go to the police with circumstantial clinic records. Victor's lawyers would shred it. They needed proof, and they needed to draw Victor out. A plan was formed, a dangerous gambit. Elena would pretend the legal battle was wearing her down. She would become visibly more frail, more confused during her court-ordered psychological evaluations. She would let word filter back to Victor, through careful leaks, that she was considering a settlement to end the stress. The bait. She would hint at revising the controversial codicil, bringing Victor back to the negotiating table, and they hoped, back to the scene of the crime. Alex's role in the plan was the most dangerous. He was to become the disgruntled employee. He would have a staged, loud argument with Elena in the garden, within earshot of the household staff, where he would accuse her of ingratitude and storm off. The performance would be for Victor's spies, to sell the narrative that Elena was alienating her allies, becoming isolated, vulnerable. The day of the argument, Alex's hands were cold with sweat. He stood in the Japanese garden with Elena, their voices carrying across the still water. "You're using me as a shield," he shouted, the lines Franklin had written for him feeling alien in his mouth. "I won't be your puppet in this family war anymore." Elena, to her credit, was magnificent. She trembled, her voice breaking with a convincing mix of regal indignation and genuine seeming hurt. "Then go, everyone else does." He left. The black SUV did not take him to the rendezvous point. It drove him to a safe house, a nondescript apartment in the city where David was waiting. "The performance was convincing," David said, monitoring feeds. "We've already detected increased signal traffic from Victor's known devices. He's taking the bait." For Alex, locked in a sterile safe room, the wait was agony. He was separated from Mia, who was with Jamie under the watch of 2 other security agents. He felt like a weapon that had been fired and now sat in a dark locker, useless. He watched the live feeds from hidden cameras throughout the estate's main living areas. He saw Elena, alone in the library, pretending to read, looking every bit the defeated, fragile woman. 2 days passed. Then, on the evening of the 3rd day, Victor arrived, unannounced, carrying a bouquet of flowers and a small, elegant gift bag. The cameras watched him embrace his aunt, his face a mask of concern. They sat. He poured her tea from the service already in the room. And then, as he handed her the cup, his body blocked the camera's view of her cup for a critical 2 seconds. In the safe house, David Chen leaned forward. "There, did you see it? The right hand, the slight tremor over her cup." He rewound the footage, zoomed in. It was blurry, inconclusive, a hand moving. It could have been nothing. But then they watched Victor leave. He took the gift bag with him, but he left the flowers. As soon as his car cleared the gate, David's team moved in. They sealed the tea service. They took the flowers. They took Elena for another urgent blood test. This time they found it, Traces of the benzodiazepine, not in Alina's blood, but on the delicate porcelain rim of her teacup. A microscopic residue, applied in a quick, slick gesture from a pad concealed in Victor's palm. The dose was subclinical, not enough to cause immediate effect, but a test, a proof of concept. He was checking her security, seeing if they would detect it. They had him, not for attempted murder, but for adulteration of a food substance, for assault. It was a start. It was the crack in the dam. David presented the forensic report to Franklin, who immediately filed an emergency motion with the court overseeing the competency case, alleging criminal misconduct by the petitioner. It was a legal earthquake. The judge suspended the competency hearings and referred the matter to the district attorney's office. Victor was arrested the next morning at his penthouse apartment. He was charged with assault, adulteration, and attempting to inflict a noxious substance. The charges were serious, but they were not the end. They were the beginning of the end. As Alex watched the news footage of Victor being led away in handcuffs, a strange hollow feeling settled in his chest. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the machinery it had set in motion, the lawsuits, the publicity, the security protocols, was still grinding forward. He had helped catch a monster, but in the process, he had become permanently enmeshed in a world of monsters. The rain-soaked kindness that started it all felt like a story belonging to another man in another lifetime. He returned to the estate. Alina greeted him in the garden where they had argued. The pretense was gone. She looked old and tired and utterly relieved. "Thank you," she said simply. Alex nodded, but he couldn't smile. The cost was still being tallied. The legal battles were not over. The public story was still a toxic mix of gossip and scandal, and he now knew, with crystalline clarity, the price of the life he had entered. It was paid in paranoia, in deception, in the constant awareness of the shadows where people like Victor waited. He had wanted to provide a better life for his daughter. He had just never imagined it would be a life that required armed guards and forensic chemists to keep safe. The battle was won, but the war for a normal life felt farther away than ever. And as he stood there, the first cold drops of a new autumn rain began to fall, whispering against the leaves, a chilling echo of the day it all began. Victor Alden's trial was not the dramatic spectacle he might have feared. It was a quiet, procedural unraveling. Faced with the forensic evidence from the teacup, his financial links to the clinic, and the testimony of the former nurse, his legal team advised a plea bargain. He pleaded guilty to charges of assault, adulteration, and attempting to inflict a noxious substance. In exchange, the more complex charges of attempted murder were dropped. The judge, reviewing the evidence of premeditation and the vulnerability of the victim, sentenced him to 12 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 8. The civil competency suit was dismissed with prejudice. Victor was no longer an heir. He was inmate number 43209. For Alina, the victory was freedom. The constant, silent pressure that had shaped her life for years, the expectation of familial betrayal, was gone. The security protocols around the estate remained, but their character changed. The feeling of a fortress under siege gradually softened back into that of a private home. David Chen's team shifted from threat neutralization back to protection. Alex noticed it in small ways. The drivers started taking the direct route again. The agents watching Mia's school became less visible. With the legal war over, the public story, fed by the initial tabloid articles, slowly withered. Without Victor to fuel it, and with no new scandal to report, the narrative of the billionaire and the handyman faded from the news cycle. It was replaced, in the small circles that cared, by a different story, the nephew who tried to poison his aunt for her money. Alex Reed was a footnote in that tale, and he preferred it that way. His life entered a new phase of strange normalcy. He continued his Tuesday and Thursday visits to the estate, but the nature of the work evolved. The restoration of the A-frame cottage was completed. It stood now, not as a test project, but as a beautiful, empty space. One afternoon, Alina suggested a new use for it. "It's too large for one person," she said, "but it would make a wonderful studio for someone who works with their hands." She wasn't talking about him. She was talking about an idea. With Franklin's help, she established a small, private foundation. Its purpose was to provide grants and studio residencies for single parents pursuing trades or crafts, carpenters, potters, jewelers, welders. people whose talent was stifled by the sheer logistical weight of raising a child alone. The cottage became the first residential studio. Alex was named to the foundation's board, not as a figurehead, but as its operational director. He used his knowledge of budgets, of sourcing materials, of the grinding reality of balancing parenthood and passion. It was work that meant something, work that came from understanding both sides of the equation, the need for help, and the transformative power of receiving it without strings. The money, the terrifying, life-altering money, settled into the background of his life. The salary continued. The completion bonus clause in his contract still stood, a distant horizon. The $30 million trust codicil was filed with the court, making it a matter of public record and an immovable fact. Alex tried not to think about it. It was too large to comprehend. Instead, he focused on the tangible. He bought a small, sturdy house in a good school district with a yard. He set up a college fund, for Mia so generous it made the bank manager blink. He helped his brother Jamie start a landscaping business. The low-grade hum of financial fear was gone, replaced by a profound and quiet stability. His relationship with Alina deepened into something resembling family. They were not mother and son, but something uniquely their own. Two people who had seen the worst of human nature in each other's orbit and had chosen to build something better anyway. Mia was the bridge. Alina, who had never had children, delighted in her. She listened to Mia's stories with genuine interest. She had a piano installed in the sunroom and hired a gentle, patient teacher for Mia, who showed an immediate, joyful aptitude for it. On weekends, Alex would often bring Mia to the estate, and the three of them would have lunch. It was during one of these lunches, with Mia chattering about a school play, that Alina made an offhand remark that changed everything. "You know," she said, slicing a pear, "that first day in the rain. David's team ran your background check before I even got home. I knew about your debts before you carried the last bag to the car." Alex paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "I figured. But what you don't know," she continued, meeting his eye, "is that the original offer from Franklin was different. It was a one-time gift, $50,000, a thank you, no strings, no job. I drafted that instruction myself." Alex set his fork down. "What changed?" "David's report," she said. "It included something beyond your financials. It included the report from Child Protective Services." The air left the room. Alex felt a cold jolt. 2 years before, when Mia's mother had first left, he'd been in a bad way, depressed, struggling. A neighbor, meaning well, had called CPS, concerned he wasn't coping. A social worker had visited. The case was closed within a week, deemed unfounded. It was the most shameful, terrifying week of his life. He never told anyone, not even Jamie. "It was closed," he said, his voice tight. "I know," Alina said softly, "but it was there, and I read the summary, and I saw a father who was drowning and who pulled himself together for his child, who fought. The man who carried my groceries wasn't just kind, he was resilient, and that," she sighed, "that was what I needed to see. Kindness can be a moment. Resilience is a character, so I changed the instruction. I told Franklin to offer the job, because I didn't need a one-time beneficiary, I needed an ally. Someone who understood what it meant to keep going." It was the final piece of the puzzle, the last surprise. Her selection wasn't random, and it wasn't just about the groceries. It was about a crack in his life that she had seen and recognized and decided to help mend. Not out of pity, but out of strategic recognition of a strength he didn't know he was showing. Years passed. The rhythm of their lives found its groove. Victor was denied parole at his first hearing. The foundation placed its fifth resident in the cottage studio, a woodworker and single father of twins. Mia grew from a child into a sharp, funny preteen, her world secure and full of possibility. And then, on a bright April morning when Mia was 12, Alina Vance died. It was not dramatic. It was a stroke in her sleep, swift and silent. She was 74. The news was conveyed to Alex in the gentlest possible way by Franklin Moss, who came to his home. There was the expected funeral, small and private, attended by a handful of lawyers, David Chen's team, and Alex and Mia. There were no other family members. The will was read in Franklin's office the following week. The bulk of the estate, the corporate holdings, the investments valued in the billions, were placed into a perpetual charitable trust bearing her and her husband's name to fund medical research. It was what she had always planned. Then Franklin turned to Alex. "To Alexander Reed," he read, his voice formal, "I leave the entirety of my personal residential property, the land, the structures, and all contents therein, in fee simple. This is not an inheritance. It is a return. He gave me back my faith in the world beyond my gates. The gates are now his." Alex heard the words, but they didn't connect. The estate, the compound, the land, it was his. Franklin continued, "Furthermore, the discretionary trust, established in the codicil dated November 7th, is hereby activated and transferred to Mr. Reed to be used at his sole discretion for the benefit of his family and community." The $30 million. It was no longer a theoretical shield. It was his. And then the final clause. "I also leave to Alexander Reed my security team, led by David Chen, with funding for their services for a period of no less than 10 years, should he and they choose to continue their association. No one should have to navigate sudden wealth without guidance and protection." Alex walked out of that office into a sunlight that felt different. He was, on paper, an extraordinarily wealthy man, but the weight felt different than he'd imagined. It felt less like a prize and more like a stewardship. He was now the keeper of her refuge and of her legacy. He and Mia moved into the main house. It was strange at first, living in such vast, elegant spaces, but slowly they made it theirs. Mia's piano stayed. Alex converted a formal drawing room into a movie night space with a giant sofa. David Chen stayed on, his role evolving from protector to friend and advisor. One rainy afternoon, a year later, Alex found himself at the supermarket. It was the same chain, but a different location. The rain was the same, a cold October downpour. As he loaded bags into his car, he saw an elderly man struggling with an umbrella that had turned inside out. The man's paper grocery bag was softening at the bottom. Alex stopped. He walked over. "Here, let me give you a hand with that." He took the failing bag, transferred the groceries to a spare canvas bag in his own trunk, and helped the man to his car. As he turned back to his own vehicle, he caught a glimpse of a dark SUV parked a few rows over. David Chen gave him a slight, almost imperceptible nod from the driver's seat. Old habits. But this time, Alex didn't feel watched. He felt accompanied. He got in his car, the heater blowing, the wipers pushing the rain away. He thought of Alina. He thought of the impossible thread that connected this moment to that 1 year ago. He had carried groceries for a stranger, and in return he had been given a world. But he understood now that the real transaction hadn't been about groceries or money. It had been about seeing and being seen. She had seen the resilience in him. And he, in the end, had seen the profound loneliness in her, and had offered not just his hands, but his humanity. The rain on the windshield blurred the parking lot lights into halos. He sat for a moment, the engine running, thinking of Mia at home, probably practicing piano, thinking of the empty cottage studio, waiting for its next resident, thinking of the strange, winding road that had led him here. He wasn't just a single dad who'd gotten lucky. He was a man who had performed a simple act of decency and had, in turn, been trusted with a legacy. The surveillance, the threats, the money, they were just the plot points. The story was simpler. It was about a hand offered in the rain and a hand that reached back and the life that grew in the space between them. He put the car in gear and drove home through the gray, curtained afternoon to the warm house and the waiting life that was now, irrevocably, his own. So what is the true story here? Is it a fairy tale about kindness rewarded? Or is it something more complex, a map of the invisible currents that run between people, currents of need, of perception, of hidden wars fought over legacies? The story of Alex Reed and Alina Vance lives in that tension. It's a testament to the fact that the most consequential moments of our lives often look, from the outside, like mundane errands, a bag of groceries, a shared umbrella, a decision to stop. We move through our days unaware of the silent observations being made, the hidden assessments, the ways in which our character is being logged by a world we cannot see. For Alina, Alex was a data point that broke a lifelong hypothesis. Her wealth had taught her that everyone has a price, that every relationship is ultimately a transaction. In Alex, she found a counter-example. He helped without calculation. and when immense fortune was later offered, he accepted it not as an entitlement, but as a responsibility. He proved that authenticity could survive the corrupting influence of money, that it could, in fact, be strengthened by it. For Alex, Elena was a window into a realm of staggering power and profound isolation. He learned that security can feel like imprisonment, that legacy is a battlefield, and that the greatest wealth can be the most effective cage. His reward was not just financial freedom, it was an education in the true cost of the life he had once fantasized about. He gained the world, but only after understanding its weight. And what of the surveillance, the bodyguard watching from the rain? Was it a violation or a safeguard? In the world of extreme wealth, the line between protection and paranoia is razor-thin. David Chen's observation was the mechanism that connected two disparate lives. It was the tool that proved a man's character was not performance. In a different story, that same tool could have been used to destroy him. Technology is neutral. It is the human intention behind the lens that writes the narrative. This story endures because it speaks to a deep human longing, the longing to believe that our good deeds are seen even when no one is looking, the longing to believe that integrity has value in a cynical world, and the anxious curiosity about what powerful, hidden forces might be shaping our lives from the shadows. We will likely never know if our own groceries have been carried under silent observation. We will not receive a lawyer at our door, but the core mechanism of the story is universal. Every day, in small ways, we are tested. We choose whether to see the person struggling in the rain or to look away. We choose whether to be kind when there is no visible reward. And in those choices, we write the invisible story of who we are, a story that may one day be read by someone with the power to change everything. The rain falls on everyone. It is what we choose to do in it that defines the downpour as either a disaster or the beginning of a different life. If you found this exploration of hidden worlds and human connection compelling, make sure to subscribe. We delve into the unseen architectures of power, money, and the moments that redefine a life. Thanks for watching.